So today we're going to paint a piece of toast. I've got a piece of sourdough toast. And what I'm going to do is also have another piece of that same bread, another slice, which I can use for printing texture onto my painting. So you need a piece of toasted sourdough and a piece of plain untoasted sourdough. Right, so to begin with, you're going to do a little outline drawing with pencil. And then you're going to mix up a sort of beigey colour. Now, that is a mixture of yellow ochre and grey, and it's very, very pale wash. And you're going to have your untoasted piece of bread to hand. So let me just show you what I mean. And you want to do it quite splodgy. And the reason you're doing it splodgy is because you want to be able to get any texture you can get, and this helps. Like that. And then once you've done that, you're going to use your bread, which is untoasted. You're going to place it on the page, and then you're going to press it down. You may notice a bit of colour on this side, and that's because I was using it for printing, I think yesterday actually. Okay, and then you lift off and you get texture on there. You can see it, it's very pale actually, but there is quite a bit of texture in there. I might do another layer as well. Just do another layer. I might change mine just to get a little bit more in there. See if I can get a bit more texture. And get even more. I'm going to use a slightly stronger mix now, because I think that might be better. And then I'm going to do the print again, making sure I've got the bread in. Oh, that's better. Yeah, that's better. I'm going to do it once more. That's better. That's nice. I've got some, can you see the little textures I've got there? I've left a little bit of a rim around the edge for the crust, but there's definitely some nice texture in there, which is exciting. And you can even use the bread to add in more texture if you want as well. It's quite useful to use the actual objects you're painting. Sounds a bit mad, but with things like even a pomegranate, when it's dried out, you can use one half that's dried out and use that for printing. It's really nice. Okay, blow off the excess. And now we've immediately got a nice bread-like texture, which is fantastic. And it helps us with the rest of the painting. So you are going to need a smaller brush, like a size 6, as well as your normal brush. So a smaller brush, and the colours we're going to need are actually quite orangey. It's quite a little bit of fiery sort of orange going on. So I'm going to sort of up the ante on the colours. I'm going to use some orange. That's a bit of old colour there, but I might add some pink to that. I'm going to use some pink. I'm going to use some cadmium yellow. I'm going to put over this side, cadmium yellow. Oh, I've got a mix of grey in there. That doesn't matter. There we are. Cadmium yellow. And then I'm going to use a bit of sienna as well. So that's useful there. Okay, so I've got nice 4 colours. I've got cadmium yellow. That's a bit lemony, that one. Let me put in a bit more of the other one. That's better. Cadmium yellow, sienna, orange, which has got a tiny bit of brown added to it, and alizarin crimson. So we've got our colours. So now what we're going to do is look at our toast, of course. and have a look at what we need to do. So the first layer I'm going to do is a little bit of the cadmium yellow, but observing your toast, you'll see that the toaster is a little bit irregular. Well, mine is. So I'm just laying some colour more on one side than the other, the bottom here, to get a bit of that toast-like feel. And then I'm going to go for a little bit of that down the bottom here because where it's burnt a little bit. So like that. Bit of orange on there. And then I might go for a bit of orange up here. Still damp this area, but that's fine. Orange, like that. A little bit around here, like that, and like that. Okay. And then notice the patterns that you've got. So I'm going to put some orange. It's sort of like almost like I'm doing it a little bit wet in wet here. It's sort of like a marbling effect almost, where it goes around the burnt bits. It's like a marbling effect. So I'm using my brush, and you can see the original texture coming through here. And I might do a little tiny smudge of the orange down here, not much though, because it's a bit more beige in that area. I'm focusing on the top part. I'm actually going to add a little bit of pink in. I'm dropping it in just a little bit. Don't forget watercolour dries lighter. So I'm putting a little bit of that veiny effect into the orange, just a bit, and a bit into the crust. That's the pinky colour, like that. Just letting that sink in, and then I'm going to go for more of an orange colour because I've got a cadmium orange now instead of a homemade orange, and it's a little bit more punchy, which is quite useful. Just adding little bits, dropping them in, not worrying if they smudge much, that's fine because we're dropping it into wet on wet just to get a bit more of a sense of blending. Okay, now I'm going to deal a little bit with what's down here, which is a sort of greyish shadow. So I'm gonna use a bit of grey for that. Might put a touch of yellow ochre in. It's going to go for putting a little bit of grey there. Just to get a sense of some of this. I'm doing quite generic. What I mean by generic is nothing is too specific. I am looking at what's there, but I'm just sort of giving a general quality of shadow. I don't want to be massively specific because I can do the detail of all the shadows later. It's almost like freckles, really. These are like freckles. And of course, there'll be some up here as well, so we need to do those. Do some shadows up here. It's already a tiny bit becoming more toast-like. Just a little bit. It's not there yet, of course, but we're just giving it a little bit of a helping hand now. Adding some of those shadows in. And it's quite early to do shadows in a watercolour painting, but in toast and bread, you sort of need to add it in as soon as you can because otherwise you lose sense of where you are with everything. Because it's such a complex pattern, really. It's such a complex pattern that you need a bit of help to know where you are with everything. A bit darker on some of those. And I might use a little bit for around the edge as well, just get a bit of shadow in around here. A big one. It just helps to help you sort of locate yourself, really. Just gives you a bit of depth, helps you locate where you are. And the more you do it, the more you see, to be honest, which is can be it's a bit like the surface of the moon once you start with the craters. And some are a bit more like slashes and some are more like little tiny pockets or dimples. And it can be quite daunting because once you start this, like I say, and also some of them have got a tiny bit of you notice I'm using my finger, it's a bit like using cotton wool. Shouldn't really, but I quite like using a finger. And there's some different directions. There's some here which is like that and some which is like that. As soon as you start doing this, you start to get, I mean, you can use cotton wool. I've got very, I sort of have got, I've washed my hands and they're very dry and very non-greasy. But you have to be careful. You can't just start using greasy fingers on this. And then you've got some little tiny dots as well. Now, normally, as I say, I would leave all of this till the end, but because it's quite hard to navigate around all of this, it's quite nice to position yourself by putting these in. Not all of them, but just a few. Now, I've noticed with this one here that there's a bit of like orange in it. It's almost orangey, that one. So I'm going to put that in, a little bit of orange over the top. I'm going to put a little bit of orange into some of them because they sort of have a warmth in them, I've noticed. They're not all grey. Some of them are a bit sort of got a luminance of orange or something. Right, so there I am with that. That sort of helped me a bit. Oh, I found one there as well. So I guess what I could have done is grey with a bit of orange mix in there. But that's beginning to be quite nice. I'm quite enjoying this. Well, I am really enjoying it actually. And beginning to get a sense of the bread. Not there yet, but I just have got the basics. So now I'm going to try and do is up the ante on the fiery toasted part of it, which is up here. I'm going to go much more sort of intense orange. I think it can take it. I think it can take it. So I'm going to go much stronger up here and be a bit brave with it because it's quite sort of like raging this. So I'm going to go in here, little dashes and dots, just to build up around these craters, this sort of raging, toasted colour, which is really rather wonderful, actually. And it feels a bit strange to be painting toast, doesn't it? But when you actually think of it like almost like a landscape or like, you know, the crater of the moon, as I was saying, it makes it much more interesting. Don't think of it as toast. Think of it as just something dramatic, a dramatic landscape. There's quite a lot of fieriness here, which is really nice. They're like stitches of the burnt area here as well, around there. And of course, don't forget that the orange dries lighter anyway. We'll just keep adding in bits like that. So keep going with that. And I'll just come back to you in a second. And it's at this point that I'm going to put the sienna in because it's got that sort of lovely brownish colour to it as well. So I'm going to go for a bit more sienna. I'm going to add that in. And that's going to be in adjoining the areas I've just done. It's sort of like a little gentle. This is the burnt sienna, by the way. Little flatter bits. There. I mean, ideally, you should probably wait till that dries, but I'm a bit impatient sometimes. We're getting there slowly but surely. And I might use some of that sienna as a very watered down mix. Very watered down in some of these areas around here. And coming back to the good old bread, I'm going to use it. I'm going to break it up a bit and use it to get some lift off a little bit, but also to get some texture back in. You can slightly dampen it if you want. It's just like cotton wool, really. Okay, so we need to get the breadcrumbs off. And I think I'm going to use this also, this bread, to actually, I'm going to put, let's see what happens. It's a bit of a gamble, but I'm going to see what happens if I put a little bit of grey onto it. I don't know whether this will work, but I'm experimenting. See if I can get a bit of grey on. Oh yeah, it does work. Good. Just getting a bit of grey patches in here. Okay, it's quite useful actually, it's quite handy. So we've done the sort of undercoat, and now what we're going to do is let this dry fully, and then I'm going to add some layers of a very yellowy orange over the top of here. So it has to dry fully. You can use a hairdryer if you want. And once you've done that, we'll come back to it in a second. So my painting's dry and I'm going to warm it up, and I've created a sort of egg yolk colour, a little bit more orangey than egg yolk. But what I've done is I've mixed orange and yellow ochre. So I'm doing quite a watery mix, but I just want to warm up the whole painting. So I'm just going to put some of this. Now you have to be careful how you put it on. You don't want to be too rubby with it because you don't want to damage what's underneath. You're just warming up, particularly up here, some of the bread so it's not quite so pale. Better to start off pale, but you want to warm it up at the end. And then you're going to let that dry. So I'll come back to you in a second. Also, just to mention that you can still use your bread to get some texture back in there as well. Don't press too hard because you don't want to lift all the colour off, but just to get some extra texture in there. You may get little bits on it, but don't worry, you can always blow those off or brush those off later. So now I've mixed a very sort of almost rusty blood red, which is alizarin crimson, sienna brown, a touch of black or grey, just to get a bit of depth to it. And this is going to be for the sort of dark pinky areas, which are sort of around here and around the edge. And I'm using a smaller brush. So I'm going to go in and quite gingerly, quite sort of carefully, start to using a very, small brush, just getting in some of these much stronger areas which are around the edge and where it's very much toasted. And I'm going to use my bread to lift off a little bit when I've put it down. So you could use cotton wool if you don't want to use your bread, but just to lift off a little bit as I put it down. So just so that we get a bit of texture put back in and it's not quite so strong. Just little dots and dashes around the stronger, more toasted areas, like this, and dabbing it off with cotton wool or the bread. So wherever you can see it's very much toasted, especially around that edge there, you can use your cotton wool or your bread to lift off a bit once it's put down. And it just brings out a bit of strength in there. And the patterns are really interesting actually when you see the patterns. You can use a size 4 brush or a 2 brush for this. And some areas are really quite dark. It's a bit like a sort of almost like a lace effect. And I'm going to add in a bit of orange because I think we need a bit of orange on this. I think I'm missing a bit of orange. I went quite red on it and I think maybe I might add back in some orange. I might even do that with a colouring pencil actually, because sometimes you have to know when to stop with the actual painting of it. And I think, to be honest, that's probably enough painting for now. So I'm going to come back to it with some orange. So wait till it's fully dry, has to be fully dry. And I'm going to use an orange pencil. I'm just going to go over some of the areas just to get some of that pink settled back a bit, very gently, not too much at all, just very, very gently. Blending. Could even use a bit of yellow, I suppose, as well. Might use some yellow too. Looking quite good. I mean, you can carry on, and also what you could do is put some normal graphite pencil on as well, which I might do. Get some pencil and go into some of those dark areas. Maybe in some of the craters as well. Pick some of these out now with a pencil. So this is a black colouring pencil, but I might use a normal pencil now as well. We'll get some and pick some of those out. Now, some people say this is cheating. I mean, the pure watercolorists might not want to do this, but I think whatever it takes to help you with your painting is fine. And there really aren't that many rules. I mean, just don't use black if you can, although I have used black, but with the watercolor, avoid using black, avoid white, let the light of the paper come through. And that's really it, really. It's looking quite good, actually. I'm quite pleased with that. I can use it for a little few dots there on the bread. Yeah, I think I might go into here a bit because there's a bit of texture in here as well. Like that. It's looking quite good. I'm quite pleased with that. Not bad for, what is it, 20 minutes? And of course, you'll have longer to do this because you can pause it, can't you? Whereas I'm just doing a demo quite fast. Uh, I think that'll do for now. And you can add to it. You can add colouring pencils. You can add more orange, more yellow. You can put a wash of maybe a yellow over the top when it's bone dry. You'd have to hair dry it first, and you'd have to use a nice big brush for that, and not rub. You mustn't rub when you're putting a final wash that marries it all together. No rubbing, just a gentle wash and then leave it. But it has to be really set in and bone dry before you do that. But there you are, piece of toast, sourdough toast, and a new technique of using the actual object to print with, which is the bread. So good luck with yours. Hope you enjoy it.